So as we get down to the end of 2023, I figured, let me do a little video on my most carried knives of 2023 and what I would still recommend today. So let me back up a little bit. This is Appalachian ADV Rider. Thank you for joining me. And I'd like to encourage you to subscribe to the channel and check out my playlist. I got a lot of other videos. And if you like this video, leave a thumbs up. And don't forget to join me on Facebook and Instagram under Appalachian ADV Rider. All right, so getting back to the purpose of this video, I figured, you know what? I bought a lot of knives. This has been a great year for knife buying. A lot of times you buy a knife and you think, I'm going to like this knife for whatever reason. I want it for, you know, whatever. And then you get it and it doesn't speak to you, right? Or you feel you don't really have a need for that. So I'd like to save you a lot of trouble. So these are knives that I purchased that I love, that I carry. I would say to you, you definitely should go out and buy these, and here's why. It's funny how our tastes change. You know, one minute you like something about a knife, and then you carry it for a week, and you go, you know what, that thing I don't like anymore about it. Or it's not enough. It doesn't make up for the other aspects of the knife that you don't like. So here's a layout of all the knives that I've carried in 2023 a lot, or mostly, and that I still carry and I can still recommend. So let's start here with my fixed blade. This is a Bradford Guardian 3.5. The 3.5 doesn't have additional finger grooves on this knife. It's just a flat scale. It has just tremendous ergonomics in it. This finger groove here, you know, places your hand up high. You can't slip forward onto the blade, so it's safe. These McCarter scales, you can see they look very dark because I carry this knife in a Kydex sheath on the outside of my motorcycle gear, and so it gets wet and it absorbs a lot of moisture and it changes the color of it. But I like it. I mean, it's getting worn in. This McCarter, it's a little sticky now over the year that I've been using it, and it's gotten a lot of rain. For some reason, it just feels stickier. This knife has tremendous ergonomics. It is made out of MagnaCut, the knife that I've got, MagnaCut. I've taken it apart underneath the scales. There's no rust at all on this knife. That's one thing about MagnaCut, is it's rust resistant. So this is a great knife that you can carry on the outside of your gear. You can expose it to moisture, and you don't have to do any maintenance on it at all. And it will look brand new, except for this, you know, wonderful wear over here that I really appreciate. I really like. So every time I ride my motorcycle and every time I motor camp, this knife is with me. So, highly used knife, highly recommend it. It's a fixed blade, no moving parts, really tough. The blade stock is real thick. It's a solid tang design. It's got great weight to it. Super sharp. Just a fantastic knife for an outdoorsy person, which I am. So, highly recommend it. Guardian 3.5. All right, putting that aside. This knife here is an MKM Micro. It's a Vox design knife. It's an Italian made. It's a beautiful knife. I mean, it has wonderful lines to it. It's perfectly balanced. I don't know if you see that. It hangs from your neck. It comes with this leather sheath with a magnet in it. It's real light. It hangs from your neck. I wear this knife all the time. You know, I'm home. A lot of times I'm home. I don't have any pants. You know, I'm walking around in my underwear or pajamas. I might have this knife on my neck, and I have it on my neck often. So it's so comfortable. It just kind of disappears. It's good for, like, it'll cut 95% of what you use a knife for. I mean, this knife is useful for 95% of, you know, your knife tasks. Always on your neck. It's great steel. I think this is M390, which is the European equivalent of 20 CV, essentially. Love this knife. Carry it on my neck all the time. Great, great knife. All right, moving on. My Spyderco Spidey Chef. And this knife gets panned a lot in reviews, and I can understand it. It's got, you know, It's real super thin. It's got not the greatest ergonomics on it because it's, you know, it's super thin. The hole here is partially obstructed. You know, it's only right-handed only. You can't really open it from the left hand because it's got the lock bar. It's got a sheep's foot blade, which I love, but you know, not everybody's accustomed to that sheep's foot. This is a great food prep knife and a camping knife, and it's probably my most used knife. I don't know if you can tell. A lot of wear on this knife. I love it. It's light. It's thin. It's got this wire pocket clip. It's got this beautiful belly on there, so for food prep, you can get down on the food and slice and chop. And it's made out of LC200N, which is a nitrogen-based steel. This is part of the Salt line Spyderco, which is basically like rust-proof steel. And everything here is designed to be rust-resistant. That's, you know, marine-grade steel. This is carbonized frame lock. It's got, you know, okay action to it. It's almost got like a bushing when you close it. It's got a weird, nice bushing sound, a cushioning sound. It rides real great in the pocket because of the way the clip comes here and how this knife leans to the right when you put it in your pocket. You can get your hand in the pocket, which I typically won't carry anything else in my pocket besides the knife, but I like it when the knife cants to the right. So a lot of these will do that. And you'll see this is the reason why I carry these knives. You'll see a theme here. I'll review it at the end. So anyway, I use this knife a lot. It was one of my first more expensive knives. I think it was maybe $300 or something. I don't really remember, but it was, at the time, it was my most expensive knife by far. And I use it for moto camping, but I carry it around too otherwise. But since I bought it, I have purchased a lot of other knives, and this really is now delegated to moto camping trips. I normally won't carry it otherwise, only because of that. But if you could have to buy one knife, this might be it, right? Rust proof, thin, light, easy to carry with the wire clip. Almost deep carry. I mean, pretty concealed, especially with the dark color on the blue jeans. It'd be harder to see this knife. Great knife. All right, moving on. Yeah, so this is the Paramilitary 2, and it's got aftermarket scales by Flytanium. That's the name of the company. They made out of titanium, and the design is called Lotus. It adds great weight to this knife, and what you're going to find out is I'm reviewing these knives. These are my favorite knives because I like larger size, heavier knives. So keep that in mind when you hear me rave about a knife. It's if you don't like bigger, heavier knives, you're going to hate everything that I like. So keep that in mind. So this is one of my favorite knives because of it's so ergonomic, but I'm reviewing it with these scales, right? When it came with the stock scales, it's flat, and I'm not reviewing that knife. I'm reviewing this knife, okay? This is the S110V steel, which basically, if you use a knife like I do for just paper cutting and maybe cardboard occasionally, and you may never have to sharpen this knife again. It's like that kind of super steel. It's known to, possibly chip, but you would have to really impact this knife and use it in a way that's it's not designed for. So it won't really chip on you if you use it for like as a normal knife. This knife here with this scale is so ergonomic. I cannot describe to you. This is probably one of my most ergonomic knife, if not the most ergonomic. I wouldn't say it's not the most, because I wouldn't say it's the most ergonomic, excuse me, because of this pocket clip. I think that's the biggest drawback. Sometimes I'll take this clip off, because when you take this clip off, this knife is perfect. It's got a palm swell. It's got these grooves here and these finger things. I don't know how to describe to you. And I have double XL hands, but my hand just falls in the right place everywhere in this knife. And especially, like I say, you take that pocket clip out, and this is a part of my arm. This is a great long blade. You know, Spyderco is one of the few companies that offers incredible variety of steel, and they're known to do the heat treating right. So this S110V is a steel that I really enjoy owning. It's not stainless, but it resists stain quite a bit, and it's super tough. I mean, it's super edge retention on this thing. And so this one, I love the Spidey flick. Excuse me, I love the Spidey hole to engage the knife. So it's great. You can stick your fat finger in there. It's easy to deploy with gloves. This is a great deployment method. This has a compression lock, which I really enjoy a compression lock. So if you never used it before, a good thing about a compression lock is you can take your fingers out of the pathway of where the blade falls and close this knife without risk of injury. So see, you can open it that way and close it that way. It bounces out a little bit. What you'd have to do is basically you get used to these knives. When you close it, after you close it, you just push your hand on top of it. So this knife is great ergonomics with this thing, great weight, great steel, you know, awesome blade length. It's, you know, it's got somewhat of a delicate tip. You'll find that most of these are much harder used knives. This is one of my more delicate knives, but it's just perfect with these scales. I cannot tell you how perfect this knife is, especially when you take that pocket clip off. And sometimes I'll just take it off and I'll just carry it in my pocket, like the old school, right? I mean, when I started using knives, they didn't have pocket clips. You just stuck it in your pocket or it went into a leather sheath. All right, so that's that one. Spyderco Shaman. So this also has the Flytanium Lotus scale and titanium. If I remember correctly, with these scales, this knife weighs 6.6 ounces, which is, by some measures, a heavy knife. I love this knife. This is one of the most perfect knives. I can't describe to you how absolutely perfect this knife is. If you had to like make a criticism of it, other than the weight, I mean, with these scales, is you know people will talk about this compression lock. As you close it, the knife will sometimes touch your finger there. I mean, it's, yeah, you see how this part of the blade pops out. So this part here, it touches your finger here. You can try to position your finger differently and miss it, but it's not, if you had to, come up with some sort of criticism to this knife, that would be it, right? And otherwise, it's just a really perfect knife, especially with these scales, all right? And I'll get back to this Para 2. I mean, this Para 2 is square without these scales. I mean, these scales make it rounded. Now, this one here, the stock scale on it, which is a G10 scale, comes rounded. So, but this adds the weight, and it just makes this knife feel so much more solid, and it adds acoustics to it. I mean, listen to that. I'm gonna shut up. Listen to that. I don't know if that knife picks it up, but wow. I love that sound. This blade here is a big honking blade. It doesn't have a sharpening choil, which I don't really like about this knife, but I mean, it is what it is, right? It's a pretty thick blade. It's got a pretty thick tip to it. You'd be hard pressed to break that one. It's not it's not a real delicate tip to it, but it's not the sturdiest I've ever seen. It has a very tall flat grind to it. It's almost like a saber grind, but it does have a little flat edge here to it. Anyway, the Spidey hole, love the Spidey hole. I love that you could choke up on this one, just like the Paramilitary 2. Jimping's falling in the right place. The ergonomics on this knife is just amazing. The pocket clip doesn't bother me as nearly as much as that Paramilitary 2. I'm not sure why that one bothers me so much, but it's one of the few ones on this list that actually is kind of in a way. Anyway, great knife, great ergonomics, great weight, great thickness, great size. This knife is perfect. All right, moving on. Ooh, my man, Les George. I love his stuff. This is a VECP in titanium, button lock, in MagnaCut. I can't praise this knife enough. I really love Les George, and I love the VECP. It's, you know, if I had to have any criticism, let me just get the criticism out of the way, right? If there's any criticism of this knife, to me, is that it's kind of thin and it doesn't have a palm swell to it. So it could, if it had any kind of contouring to this knife in the palm area, it would bring this knife to an even greater level than it is now. But, you know, neither here or there. That would be one thing I would say. You know, other than that, man, this knife is just a perfect knife. You know, if you like a button lock or you don't like a button lock, that's your call. So it's a button lock knife. So I like a button. I like it. I mean, it bounces out a little bit. Yeah, sure. I don't know. I just love that action. You know, see, it bounces out a little bit. You got to tap it, just like with the other compression lock, right? You get used to this. This is a great flicking knife. So if you're flicking it and it bounces out, doesn't land perfectly, who cares? You're going to flick it out again. Les George does an amazing job with chamfering. This knife is smooth everywhere. You pick this knife up and there's not a sharp corner on it anywhere. I love holding this knife. I love feeling this knife, opening this knife, closing this knife. I love knowing that this knife is on me. I like seeing the pocket clip coming out of my pocket. Yeah, I mean, I'm biased. This knife is amazing. The design here, he has a different, you know, different designs to this scale here. This I think is called the Morph design, but he has a flat one that's beautiful. He has some lines on it. It's great. This is a big, huge pivot. It's a T20, and I think these are like T10. If they're not T10, they're T8. So you use large fasteners. It's got a great weight to it. It carries amazing in the pocket. All these carry really well in the pocket. I love the flipping action. This knife comes in super sharp. It's just, it's an amazing blade. It's got a nice piercing tip to it, drop point here. It just feels great in the hand. I love this knife. And here we have the Ritter Hogue. So this is designed by Doug Ritter, and he had licensed this design to Benchmade, and they made, I think it was a Griptilian is the knife that precedes this one, and it has a lot of the same design cues to it. It's but this is a different version. It's made by Hogue. Benchmade no longer has the license to make this knife, or a Doug Ritter, you know, design knife, and it's now with Hogue. And they've done a great job with this knife. It's in an excellent steel, 20 CV. Comes in super sharp. It's amazingly sharp. It's nice and thick. Doesn't have a dainty point at all. I mean, the point comes in pretty good there. Jimping feels, you know, not too aggressive. I mean, I like the way the jimping feels. It grips my fingers for sure. It falls in the right spot. This handle is just amazing. The ergonomics on this knife are really, really good. I'm a fan of this access lock style knife, locking mechanism. I don't know what they call this locking. I think Access is called a Benchmade trademark or something. But this is a great knife. I like G10 as a material. It's heavy. I like weight to it, so it adds a little weight to it, but it resists wear. It resists damage. But what's nice about it is if you carry it a lot, it will round and get smooth in spots. And the material just feels silky smooth. I really enjoy G10. It feels great in the hand. It's warm. I don't know how to describe that. So if you're a tactile person, you may understand what I'm talking about. This pocket clip just works. I mean, I know I don't like that the head are sticking up. The screw heads here are sticking up, and it's sometimes hard to get it over your pocket. But it's, you know, in terms of the clip, it's easy to slip on, and it works pretty good. I have no real complaints about this thing. I mean, other than, you know, if they use flatter heads, that would be a better design, you know, perspective. Great knife. It's not very expensive. I think it's the cheapest one on the table. When I say not very expensive, I mean it's the cheapest one on the table. I think it's like $160 if I remember correctly. You know, the pocket clip, you can do left to right, but it's tip up only. Great knife. Love it. All right. Carry this a lot. And, you know, I carry this in my back pocket. Sometimes I don't even clip it. You know, it's G10. You can get it at, I think it's a Knife World exclusive, but you can beat this knife up, and I feel confident in using it. Moving along here to my Hinderers. All right, so this is a XM18. This is the Battle Bronze color, and I got a Battle Bronze scale to it. I love this scale. I love this color, the Battle Bronze. I think that's my favorite finish of theirs, that and the working finish. This is a heavy knife. It's also, this one is the Wharncliffe, but it's a fatty. So it's a little thicker stock. I think it's as thick as the XM24. So it adds a little weight to it, and then you got the titanium scales. So this is a nice weighty knife. I think it's in over 6 ounces. Because it's the fatty, it's got a very stout tip to it. This Wharncliffe blade is just a great EDC blade. It's just a great, and it's even, you know, a good offensive blade from what I understand. You know, I've never used it in that way, but and Hinderer has some of the best, I think has the best pocket clip. It goes, this knife, all the Hinderer knives just carry really well in my pocket. They slip in easy. They can't to the right side. At least this one does. But they all slip in and out of the pocket easily, and they disappear, right? This knife is a frame lock. It's got a steel lock bar insert. It's got a very good action. The sound's really good. It just feels like it's thunky. The one thing I don't like about the XM18 is this flipper is hooked at the very, very end. And when I hold it in my hand, sometimes it, you know, just the very end of that digs into my finger. And that didn't bother me until I got this one. Hinderer clips. But we'll get back to that. So, yeah, so that's one thing I don't really love about this. But I do love how this thing has like a, I wouldn't call it a banana design, but the handle kind of like cants backwards, and you can grip it like here or up higher. This one has a finger choil. You can really grip it up tall. I mean, and you can get like a really up into the cutting. This is a great knife. I mean, I carry this knife quite a bit. Love the thick blade. Love the ease of carry. I love that it's hard use. This is a tri-way pivot, so it's got the bearings in there, but you can switch it to the phosphor bronze. I think it had a little bit of blade plate when I put the phosphor bronze in there, and I just like, you know what? I went back to the bearings just because of the action. I fidget with my knives quite a bit, so I like having a fidgety knife. And one of the things too is when you flick this, it has this very rough area here, or not really rough, but somewhat rough area here. So when you flick it, your finger lands on the rough area. It doesn't bother me at all, but just pointing it out. So I'm pointing that out because my other favorite knife to carry is a Hinder Eclipse. And this is also, this has got aftermarket scale. So this is the working finish. And it had like maybe a black G10. And I replaced it with the titanium in the same finish. And the G10, it was a little sharp down here, but this titanium rounds these corners out. And this knife here is my most ergonomic knife that I own in my entire collection in terms of using it. It's the most comfortable knife to hold and use of all my knives that are flippers, that are folding knives. Because, you know, I tell you what, I mean, it's hard to beat a fixed blade for comfort, right? Because it's just that you don't need a mechanism here, folding mechanism. So anyway, this has a smooth landing zone compared to that. And this here is not hooked. I don't know if you can see there's a slight difference in the angle, but that difference makes all the difference in the world. All right, so moving on, I'm gonna wrap up this one. Great knife, XM18, love it. The Fatty, Wharncliffe, carry this knife all the time. I highly recommend XM18, except that I would probably recommend the Eclipse over the 18. If you can only afford one, I would go over the Eclipse. It's less popular than the 18, so what I'm saying is not a popular thing to say, but I prefer the Eclipse. Sorry, XM18, moving that over. Getting back to this one here, Hinder Eclipse. So it's got a lot of the same mechanics of the XM18, right? The flipping action is very similar. It's the Hinderer flipping action. It's got the tri-way pivot. The frame lock, very similar feeling to it. But this knife here is just so much more ergonomic. This area where it dips down and comes back up feels great where my thumb is. Like your thumb just fits right there, and then your fingers just fall right here. There's no sharp edges. See how this doesn't rub up against your finger? This knife, now Hinder has so many different grinds, and I'm not really sure, I forgot what this is called. It's not the spear point, but this particular grind on this knife is really thick tip there. So I love that about this knife. You know, feel like it's a hard to use knife. Thick tip, real super smooth. It's got a sharpening choil. It feels real capable. It's a larger size. I love that. The weight's nice with these scales. This is probably my most carried knife of all my knives. I've taken this on camping trips and just stared at it at the table. You know, I'm just looking at it. It's beautiful. It's simple and very beautiful. To me, this is a beautiful knife. I love this knife. All right, winding down. What do we got here? This knife surprised me. I first got it. So this is the Hinder Eclipse 3-inch. The other one was 3.5 inches. All of these are 3.5 inch sort of. This is the smallest knife on the table. It has, to me, just a great feel. So it has that perfect feel in your hand as the larger size Eclipse, except it's a little shorter. Now, when I first got it, this end here, the G10, it felt a little sharp, and that's true of all of them that have the G10 there on the Eclipse, the larger ones and this one. So you got to wear that in. But I've been carrying this quite a bit, and so that's worn in. So this is no longer sharp. And this G10 here also, you know, being in my pocket and holding it and rubbing it, has developed a little smooth surface to it, and it just feels good in my hand. I like I'm really beginning to like G10 as a material, you know. It's warm, smooth. It feels like, you know, I mean, I know it takes a lot of, you know, it takes a licking and keeps on ticking. I don't know. So this one has the shadow boxing. It's G10 on top of titanium. This titanium is chamfered. It's real round. It's beautiful. I love the shadow boxing look to it. It's just, for somehow this thing was sexy. I don't know how to describe that to you. The fasteners are domed shape, so that's a nice touch. When you feel it, you rub your hand on it, it's got a nice feel to it. And this, like I said, this G10 is starting to feel really nice as it wears. So this flipper here doesn't have any texturing on, which I prefer. I like it really smooth like this. I'm not sure why you even need chimping there, but so this one doesn't have any. It's this is a liner lock, not a frame lock, which I prefer. All of those are frame locks, so that's another thing I like about this one. This one is becoming my favorite hinderer, actually. And part of the reason is because I love the Eclipse shape, but this one is a liner lock, and I prefer a liner lock over a frame lock. It's just a little more secure when you're holding it and you're bearing down on it. You're not exerting a lot of pressure on the locking mechanism, right? On the you know, where the tang of the blade is meeting the end of the lock bar. So as you grip down on it, and you're forcing your hand left, right, whatever, you're forcing, you're putting pressure on that connection, and that's what's keeping this blade upright. So having something else above it protects that locking mechanism, and it protects you, right? And one of the things I like about this knife is this, like, Spanto blade. At this, it's almost like a harpoon. I love that. I don't know what to tell you. I like this knife. I like the size. I like the blade. It's sharp. I like the way it feels. I love its action. And man, does this thing just disappear in a pocket. It's got this beautiful pocket clip. It rides so well in your pocket. And something about this thing, the thickness feels really good to me. I mean, this is obviously a very personal preference thing, right? Something about this form factor, I love this knife. It really is becoming one of my favorite knives of all time. All right, moving on. Here's the big surprise for me. Microtech Stitch with a ram lock. Can you hear that? Great sound to it. This is G10. It's a fluted G10. I got the partially serrated blade here. This knife is amazingly sharp. It's incredibly sharp. Both the serrated part and the straight part. It's got this spear point blade. It's sick looking, right? The fasteners are industrial. This knife looks like alien-ish, or kind of reminds me of like a Star Trek almost character. I don't know who it would be, a Klingon or, you know, whatever. I don't know why I say that, other than it looks bad. I mean, it's got the, you know, the Microtech Talon or whatever you want to call it, which I normally don't like it, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying I like it, but if somehow it looks appropriate on this knife. This backspacer's titanium, but it's got, I was talking about how industrial this knife is. That adds to that industrial look to it. It's got the spring here that kind of, to me, looks mechanical. You got the pin here with you know, lines on it, milling, you know, lines going this way, milling going this way, jimping, whatever you want to call it, and then lines going this way. Very industrial. got the X, you know, with the layered XXXXX below. It, the handle is thin. It's like a, this is a banana too shape, but it's thin. I mean, it gets thicker here, but in the middle, it's the thinnest, and it feels good. And something about it just, it melts in my hands. It's an interesting knife, is what I'm trying to say. It is a sharp knife. I wouldn't say it's a, you know, hard use. This knife is, the tip gets pretty thin. So I guess that would be the biggest drawback. But it's a great knife. It rides amazing in the pocket. It just disappears. I mean, it's a, you know, heavier knife. No heavier than any of the other ones here. I mean, they're all kind of like in that 5 to 6.5 range. I like a heavy knife, right? So, I mean, this is no heavier than any of those other knives, but it's got this G10, this fluted G10 that feels good. It's soft again. I love that G10. It feels to me very warm, inviting. I don't know. Almost luxurious. I mean, even though G10 is kind of, you know, cheap material. It's like a resin, right? It feels luxurious. I can't tell you, like a silk almost. And it's gonna wear in pretty good. It's gonna last a very long time. The liners here are, you know, half liners. I think it goes down to here, to this steel liner from here to here. But it's slanted. You can't really see it down. But, you know, if I could picture the liner with my finger, it goes like this. And it goes all the way down to down here. It's pretty thin. But, you know, I wouldn't be torquing down on this knife anyway. So it's a perfect slicing knife. You know, for sure, piercing knife. You know, lateral movement, I wouldn't go crazy with this knife. But I've been carrying knives for, you know, 50 years and I've never used it laterally. But it's nice to have a knife that would do it. I don't know if this would be that knife, but I just love owning this knife, carrying this knife, playing with this knife, having it in my pocket, knowing it's in my pocket, pulling it out, looking at it, feeling it. This is a great knife. I'm really surprised by this knife. It's interesting. It's great. I love it. It's also new, so these two knives here are my newest knives, and so they're on this table as my most carried knives in 2023, but I'm going to give a caveat here of saying, you know, maybe this is the honeymoon period for these. I don't think so, and I've had this one for a month, and I've carried it quite a bit, so this is much more recent, but anyway, just full disclosure. Love this knife. And lastly, my Chavez Rendition 229 with a kickstop. You know, I like this knife. This knife is in the ball field that I play in, right? It's a harder use knife. Now, you see all those knives there that I showed you. They're all kind of like semi-hard to, you know, harder use, and they're bigger knives and heavier knives. This kind of is the king of all that. But it is on washers, so it's not on phosphor bronze. I wish it was on phosphor bronze, because it's kind of, you know, when you sell a knife as being this hard to use, you know, thing, you want it to be on phosphor bronze. But having said that, I think it'll be fine anyway, regardless of that. This knife here, Chavez Rendition 229 with a kickstop, is a beefy, heavy, thick knife that's a cutter. It's a slicer. It's one of the few knives that are this built and also slice. And that's because it's got this compound grind. This hollow grind there's a hollow grind here, and then there's a flat grind here. And this knife is an incredible cutter. I don't know how to describe to you something about it. When you cut into cardboard or paper or anything, it takes a commanding presence during that, and it does what you need it to do with confidence. You can control it. I don't know how to describe that to you, and I'm sure it's somewhat psychological, but one of the things about this knife I can tell you is it reminds me of the design philosophy of the Romans. So one of the things that the Roman soldiers had as an advantage over, some of their enemies throughout their time, and they were, around for a long time. So they had a sword that was shorter and at one point in their time. And a lot of these guys with these bigger swords, they were so cumbersome to use that the Romans with the shorter swords were able to get in on the inside and fight on the inside and use their swords more quickly and effectively because they're lighter. Right? It's short but effective. That's what this knife is, right? To me, it's this stocky kind of compact, beefy knife that's just small, but just all purpose built, right? Everything about it's just purpose built. And it's got a great blade to handle ratio. So as much handle as there is, there's almost as much blade. With this amazing sharp knife to it, edge to it. I love this knife. It feels like I could be in a jungle fighting hand-to-hand combat with somebody. I feel like this is confidence-inspiring knife that somebody that, did that could use this knife to do that. Don't ask me why. It makes me feel that way. So, what it's all about, right? And, the jimping here is sharp, but it just falls in the right place. I mean, my hand. Oh, yeah, that's another thing. This knife came in terribly sharp. Very uncomfortable. I'll tell you right now. And I debated about it. And then I took a Dremel to it. And I just couldn't take it anymore. My hands were hurting because I was playing with it so much. This action on it, the flipping, look at that. Listen to this. I just was playing with this knife all day. It just felt, the clicking is just so solid. This knife was just so sharp that I just couldn't take it anymore. I finally broke out my Dremel and took some green compound and polished down the edges here. And now it fits pretty good in my hand. I mean, my hand fits pretty much on the whole thing and with a little bit extra. And again, I have a double XL hand. So, and I just love the sound of this. I had it was full drop shutty, but I was tightening it. The blade kept on getting a little loose, so I tightened it and then Loctite it to be a little bit tighter than it was before. So it doesn't fall shut entirely, but I can shake it just a little bit, and then it'll drop shut. It's just fine. Man, I love this knife. I want to just thank you all for joining me today. I really enjoyed this, doing these videos. And today's video was fun. I mean, it's probably long-winded. I haven't edited it yet, but I had a lot to say. And I actually narrowed all my knives down to something a little bit more manageable. Don't forget to please subscribe to my channel. 95% of the people that watch my videos do not subscribe to them. So it would help me a lot if you subscribe to the channel. Leave a thumbs up. Check out my playlist. I got a lot of knife content in there. And I also have motorcycle content and motor camping content. And exploring. I've been exploring a lot and I'm filming it. And I've got a lot more to put out there. So please subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. And I will see you another time.